Hi, it's Chris Watkin, and I'm back again with James Dearsley, who's here to talk about whether Proptech is full of shit. What do you mean by that, James?
That's a good opener, isn't it, to be honest?
Yeah.
Oh, it's difficult because I think...
It is like Proptech Bingo, though, isn't it?
It is. Well, Mr. Goddard was here, wasn't he?
Yeah, platforms, solutions,
But he
SaaS.
didn't get omni-platform.
Oh,
I was a bit disappointed with that.
yeah, I think I mentioned it, though, because I'd love to know what an omni-platform is.
Well, it's like omni-channel, isn't it? It's like everything. So it's a platform that's open to but anyway, I'm not here to question Mr. Goddard, who is a great friend of mine, so I shouldn't do that. But no, so they gave a little bit of inspiration to it. Because let's be frank, technology is often misunderstood. It's often a little bit fractured and argumentative within an industry that's trying to sort of disrupt. And I do think that there is often an interpretation by perhaps the traditional industry that it is just a little bit of hot air. And
it's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it?
Totally.
If you're an estate agency supplier, put the word Proptech, or God forbid, put the word blockchain on it.
Oh yeah, you like that one?
Yeah.
I remember that one as well. But so if you chart back about 5 or 6 years, every single venture capital deck that was put forward by a technology supplier had the word Proptech in it. About 7 years ago, every single deck was put forward with blockchain in it. It's all buzzword stuff. And I remember, it was back in the early 2010s, and the word RE-tech or RE-tech was coming over from the States. And I'm as guilty as probably very few people at that time to say, well, RE-tech means absolutely jack shit to everybody. The industry doesn't understand what real estate is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you've got commercial real estate tech or corporate real estate tech. CRE-tech was the other one.
But
it wasn't.
What does that stand for?
Well, so CRE-tech is commercial real estate technology.
Right. So was it all lumped together as Proptech then?
Yeah. So we sort of came up with a universal definition of a marketing phrase that at the time, because social media was in its nascent period as well, and so you could have hashtags, which was Proptech. And it was really to say, well, to be brutally honest with you, Chris, the Americans coming in with their RE-tech didn't mean anything to the rest of the world. So it was at the time, and there was no community got together, and Proptech was a phrase that was captured. But in absolute and honest reality, if our industry is thinking Proptech is the answer, or as a silver bullet, as some of your guests have said previously, it's not. Proptech is a symptom of change. It's not the change. The change is a digital transformation period that we're going through, which takes years and years and years to go through. And a lot of that is about a mentality shift.
Almost like a state of mind.
Shift. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So most of the people watching this are going to be estate and letting agents. What could they do differently to embrace Proptech or whatever it's called?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's a genuine and heartfelt realization that Proptech is, number one, not a silver bullet. Number two, it is only a small symptom of the change. And I think the one bit of advice I would give any estate agent, negotiator, like I was back in the day, it's
You're
just to be open.
aren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, back in the day. And actually, that's part of why I went on that journey in the first place, because I was a part of the Foxtons team back in the day when really they went through their first period of digital transformation, because what they were doing is they were adjusting their systems from that sort of hot box, applicant box to digitized systems.
So what does digital transformation mean to the average man and woman estate agent on the high street?
Well, I think first and foremost, you've got to look at the framework of what digital transformation is. And to be honest with you, it's whether or not it actually impacts that sort of person on the street in a primary role. And I don't think it necessarily does. But again, it's that open-mindedness to look at it.
When you say the person on the street, we're talking about our customers here, are we?
No, I'm talking about an estate agent, negotiator, valuer, manager of a branch, perhaps. But and this is where that confusion and problem around Proptech comes, because if you break down a framework of digital transformation, you're looking at really 5 core things. You're looking at customers. Who are your customers? And the important bit there for the industry to realize is it your customers now, or is it your customers in the future? You've got to understand both. You've also got to have an understanding of your competitors. And that's a really important one, and actually probably something which is better for the standard estate agent to understand. Who are your competitors now? They are. They're all on the high street. You can see them all. Yes, you've had some disruptive models coming in, which are trying to disrupt the space, and they are your competitors today, but also who are your competitors tomorrow. And then
What is that almost like if Amazon decided to sell houses?
yeah, and so well, yeah, I mean, you've got to look at that in two ways, really. You've got competitors which could be within industry. So, we've just seen Purple Bricks have started an advertising campaign again on the commissary thing. That is a disruptive competitor from within. And then, as you quite rightly say, you've got your ancillary competitors, or what is often termed asymmetric competitors, which have got nothing to do with the industry today, but absolutely have got the power and the consumer understanding to impact the industry in the future. So that's quite difficult, but that's for the sort of the both the powers that be at the top and also the negotiators. But you've then got three other areas around data. Is a massive instigator of digital transformation, understanding the data that you hold, and that's something that, going back to my experience, is really where Foxton set themselves apart back in the sort of the late 90s and into the early 2000s.
Well, you did do, because you had that Chiswick hub where you actually used the data, whilst most estate agents, they put it into the CRM and then it's never seen again.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily about using the data. I think it was about collecting the data at that point.
Yeah, there's no point collecting it if you're not going to use it.
But sometimes, and this is, I think, still where we are now, a lot of the agents aren't necessarily, they might be collecting some data, but they don't understand the data. They don't understand how they're collecting it, how they're structuring it, and how they're then using it. So that is the next bit of digital transformation. And then you've got the last two, which are probably a little bit more fluffy, around innovation, which is probably where the Proptech bit fits in finally.
Okay.
What are the innovation elements? And then values. What are the values of the estate agent, and trying to understand your values now, which are probably about just sort of being an estate agent, and then looking forward to the values of the future and where do you position yourself.
It's interesting you said earlier on that people think Proptech is a silver bullet. That almost estate agents, their biggest problems is bringing new business in. But if you actually look at it, number one, are there any Proptech solutions that do that? Because let's be frank, most Proptech solutions are sorting out what you've got at the moment.
In what sense? Give me an example.
Well, most of the Proptech, if you want to go and buy a Proptech solution off, from one of the stands that you see at Negotiator or EA Masters or whatever, it's all about helping them look after what they presently have.
Yeah, totally. I absolutely agree. And it's very much a sort of a short-term perspective of help. Okay. And you can easily position that at the very forefront and the sort of the point of sale, coalface style solutions. And really, that's where I think a lot of the frustration gets built up amongst the people that we know and love and have been, which is, I'm a negotiator. How's it going to help me sell? Or potentially, how's it going to help me market my properties?
Well, but again, it's the bosses that pay the checks. Their biggest issue is not necessarily what houses they sell, although we're filming this in the autumn of 22, so the market might be changing. We're on the cusp of it changing to more of a buyer's market, but at the moment it's very much a seller's market, so estate agents still need the SOP. Isn't it interesting, though, that not many estate agency suppliers who pretend to be in the technology space don't actually have much platforms, whatever you call them, to generate more business?
Totally, but I mean, I think that is the biggest challenge that the estate agency bosses have today, which is satisfying the short-termism that sort of we as negotiators and valuers have, which is how you're going to help me sell more houses right this minute.
Or get more listings.
I would argue actually to get more listings is actually the more pertinent discussion,
yes.
To be perfectly frank. But the biggest challenge of those estate agency bosses, which I think is a challenge to their leadership, because in a lot of cases, quite understandably, they are ex-estate agents. But the biggest challenge of those estate agency bosses is, how do I make my firm best placed to survive the next 10 to 20 years? And what they haven't done is they haven't factored that in for the last 10 to 20 years.
No, it's all very short. It's all the quarter. It's the size of the pipeline.
Yeah, and they have a lack of long-term thinking in the industry, which is.
Do you think if estate agency bosses saw this more of a long-term thing and sort out tech to help them in the long term, that fundamentally they'll be better placed?
100%, but that speaks to that values aspect of the digital transformation structure framework that I was giving you, which is they've got to understand what their business stands for in 10 years' time. And that's really freaking hard for them to understand. And a lot of that comes to, again, going back, who are my customers in 10 years' time? Who are my competitors in 10 years' time? What data are we collecting now that can help us? And what innovations are we going to start trialing? And have that narrative that's going to feed both at the sort of the, and I mean this in the greatest respect, the bottom of the chain of that estate agency branch, or to the very top. And, if we're talking larger agencies, the shareholders, the investors. And that's why a lot of the estate agents suffer from really serious of an innovator's dilemma, and they've never got out of it, which is, we've had a good business model in the past, but it's not necessarily fit for the future.
Almost what got you there is not going to get you to where you want to go.
But they're not the only ones struggling with it. You know, we've often been really critical of Rightmove suffering the innovator's dilemma. They cannot transition from their current business model. They're screwed, absolutely screwed, as much, in my view, as the estate agency model as it currently stands for, because they're only looking, as you quite rightly say, the next quarter, the next half year. They're not looking at, hang on, where are we going to be in 10 years' time? How do we position ourselves to get there? And that's not always a technology answer. It's always a mentality shift and understanding what you're actually doing as a product.
So coming back to the original question, is PropTech full of shit? I think a lot of people have said that it's a buzzword, but in reality, it's more of a mindset thing to enable agents to digitally transform, because all digital is just numbers, isn't it? And transform their business to play more the long term using the 5 points you mentioned.
The very sort of definition of PropTech is it's one small part of the digital transformation journey, yada, 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 which I penned back in 2017. So is PropTech full of shit? In parts, yes. In parts, it's full of hype, it's full of PR, it's full of marketing. But actually, if you take a common sense approach to the whole thing, you will realize it is one small part of that digital transformation journey that you as an individual has to go on, whether that's a negotiator or a boss, and fundamentally that change and transition that company has to go through over the next 10 years.
Thank you for your time today.
That's right.